Hello and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I have my February wrap-up, so let's just get right into it. This month was kind of a slow month for me. I only read 8 books, which I think may actually be the lowest I've ever read in a month before, and I don't even really know how it happened or why it happened. I mean, I was like a little bit busy this month, but I don't know. I think part of it was I went back to reading physical books, and I find it does take me longer to read physical books. I also didn't really read any audiobooks this month. I think I read one and that was it. And that's usually where I get like the higher book count numbers from. So that's probably a big part of it. And I don't know why, I just haven't been in the mood to do that. I haven't been working a ton, so I haven't been doing that. But let's just get to the books that I did read. So the first book that I read this month was Flawless by Elsie Silver. I did a whole reading vlog on the first 3 books in this series that are out right now, Flawless, Heartless, and Powerless. And I will link that down below if you want to listen to me talk about how much I love these books for half an hour, because that's literally what that video is. But these are small town romances. I know they're very, very popular right now. This one follows Summer and Rhett. Rhett is a professional bull rider, and he's kind of having some PR issues. And Summer's dad is his agent, and he kind of tells him, okay, like, we need to get you back on the straight and narrow. Like, I'm sending my daughter to basically come babysit you everywhere you go. She's going to be there. And so she basically moves in with him at his family's ranch. And it is just so different than anything I've ever read, to be honest. I was obsessed with these books. Like I said, I have a whole video, half an hour of me talking about how much I love these. This is one of those books where you feel like you've been there, you feel like you know them, like that ranch is like stuck in my head. And the characters are all so great, like even the side characters, you're like dying to get their books. Like, I want a book for every single side character, and I just really, really loved this one. I will say Elsie Silver's writing, I feel like, has kind of ruined me for a lot of other books now. I was watching this interview that she did, and she was saying that she likes to write her books where her characters are kind of always interacting, like every chapter they are interacting in some way, shape, or form. And I realized that I really like that, and that is usually when I don't like a book, it's because they don't do that. It's because the characters are spending so much time apart and not interacting that I feel like I'm not getting enough from the romance. And so I really, really like how she writes. I'm excited to read her other series, and I'm excited for like the other books in this series to come out obviously as well. So this was like an obvious 5-star for me. Absolutely loved it, completely obsessed. Next, I read Heartless by Elsie Silver. Obviously this follows Cade and Willa. Willa is the best friend of Summer from the first book, and Cade is Rhett's brother from the first book. And this is a single dad romance. It's very grumpy sunshine. He's looking for a nanny for his son, and Summer says, hey, I have this friend that doesn't have a job right now. Maybe she would want to come do it for you. And he's like, okay, fine, like whatever. And so she moves in to the ranch too. I really liked that aspect of these books, that like they were always kind of living together, so it was very much like forced proximity. They were always around, always interacting, and I just really, really loved that. This one was another 5-star. This one is probably my favorite, I think. I love them all, honestly, but I think this one is probably my favorite if I had to pick one. Then after that, of course, I read Powerless by Elsie Silver. This one is Jasper and Sloane's book. Jasper is kind of like the adopted brother of the 2 brothers from the first book. He grew up with them, he lived on the ranch, and Sloane is their cousin, like the brother's cousin, and she's always kind of been around, and he is, I think, 5 or 6 years older than her. So when she was a kid, she had a crush on him, and everyone kind of was like, oh, it's so cute, like look at her and whatever, and no one like ever took it seriously, and kind of just figured it died off when she got older. And this book starts off with her engaged to another guy, and things go from there. I loved this one as well. I gave it 5 stars. Jasper's a hockey player as well. There isn't a ton of hockey in this because he's kind of like taking some time off when this book takes place, but it does still have like some hockey in it. But I really, really love this one as well. 100% 5 stars. Like, cannot wait to get Reckless. Like, I'm so, so excited. Then I read Quarterback Sneak by Kandi Steiner. I gave this 2.5 stars, I think. I really did not like this book. I felt like the characters were just so weird. This one follows Holden and Julep. I hated the name Julep too, and I was reading the Goodreads review, and I was not the only one with that complaint. I thought maybe it was just me, but I just really hated that name. And this one is like a coach's daughter romance, and I didn't like how involved her dad was. I thought it was so unnecessary. She's like 22 years old in this book at least, and her dad is constantly like telling all these guys to stay away from her, and like her to stay away from them, and it's like this big huge deal when she like gets with this guy, and like I don't know, it just seemed so out of proportion. And I was like, man, if my dad was talking to me like that at 22, we would not be speaking anymore. Like, we just would not. Like, you're 22 years old. And that was just really bothering me with this. I also find that I didn't love the like turn that the smut took in this book. I don't know. This guy in the previous book I felt like was very like respectful to every woman he came across, like wanted to make sure they were okay, and like situations where they might not have felt comfortable, he was always making sure that like everyone was okay, and like he just seemed very caring and sweet. And I felt like when it came to sort of like the spice side of this book, that was gone. And I was like, I get that like people are all into like certain things on TikTok right now, but like, does every book have to have that? Like, I feel like it doesn't. Like, it just felt so out of character for him. I hated their first hookup scene in this. Like, visibly was cringing reading it, and that has like never happened to me. I just really, really did not like this book, and I didn't love the first two. I mean, the first one's probably my favorite. I did like that one. The second one I thought was just too long and drawn out, and I didn't love that. But this one I really, really hated, to the point that I don't think I'm going to pick up the fourth book because I just am over it at this point. I don't want to read anymore. But I don't know, I really didn't like the whole plotline of the story, how her dad was acting like she was like a toddler, and I just like couldn't get past that. And like I said, Holden being like this like super sweet guy, and then just like not really caring about the girl he was with, I found personally, like maybe that was just me, but like I just didn't love that vibe, and so I really did not like this book. This month was really like hit or miss for me. Like, if I read a book, I either absolutely loved it or absolutely hated it. And the next book, unfortunately, it was one that I absolutely hated. This was an arc, which is even worse. I always feel so bad when I don't like arcs, especially when they're from like my favorite authors. So this was A Love Catastrophe by Helena Hunting. I just like really, really hated this book. It follows a girl named Kitty and a guy named Miles. And like the fact that her name was Kitty bothered me right from the start. Like, regardless of the context of the book, I hated that name. But to make it worse, she runs a cat sitting business. And this guy, Miles, isn't really into cats. He's a dog person, but his mom has a cat. And his mom has recently been diagnosed with early onset dementia. So she is in the hospital, and he's looking for a new place for her to live where she can get some help. And in the meantime, he needs someone to take care of her cat. So he hires Kitty to take care of this cat. And that is sort of how they meet and where the story takes off. This was just too much cats, to be honest. Like, I'm not a cat person. Like, I know, crazy, we're out there. I like cats, but I'm not like a cat person, you know? And this book was written for like a hardcore cat person. Like, this girl did not do anything that did not revolve around cats. There were entire chapters dedicated to her just talking to cats like they were people. And I really had no interest in that whatsoever. She didn't spend a ton of time with the main guy in this, which like I said, I realized with Elsie Silver's book, that is something that I do value in books, is a lot of interaction between the two main characters, and that wasn't happening in this. And she was just so, like, it was so cheesy, you know? Like, I get that it's a rom-com and there's a certain level of cheese to be expected, but this was just too far. Her car looked like a cat. She had cat purses, cat clothes, like, everything this girl did revolved around cats, and I just, like, really couldn't get past that. And then on top of that, her best friend's name is Cat. So it's Kitty and Cat. And I was like, really? Like, I don't know. I know Helena Hunting does that sometimes with her names in some of the other books, and I haven't loved it when she did it in those either. But this one, because I already wasn't liking the whole cat thing, I feel like just made it even worse. Really, really did not like this one. Was really sad about it because I do love Helena Hunting, but just like this book was absolutely not for me at all. Next, I read Savage Beginnings by J.L. Beck and C. Hallman. This one follows Elena and Julian. This is like a mafia romance. This one I gave 2.5 stars to, too. I really didn't like this one all that much either. It wasn't super unique. It follows Julian, who basically makes a deal with Elena's dad that he is like buying her for like $10 million. And her dad is kind of having some financial issues, so he's like, sure, what the heck, you can have my daughter, and doesn't tell Elena. And then one night, Elena is just like asleep, and all of a sudden this guy is barging in her room and like essentially kidnapping her, but not really because he's made the deal with her dad. But she ends up going to this guy's house and just sort of living there. And most of this book was just really boring. It was a lot of Julian like watching her in his house on his cameras and like just like watching her basically, like that's all he was doing, while simultaneously talking about what a badass he was, but also doing like nothing that would prove that. Like, he literally was just sitting around watching her, and it was really boring. Not much was happening. Pretty much everything that happened in this I've read before in another mafia book, and I don't read a ton of mafia romance, so I felt like that wasn't the best sign if I'm seeing things, you know, like being repeated that I have seen before, and I don't even read it all that often. So I didn't love this one, didn't continue on with the series, and I probably never will, because it's just not for me. Didn't really vibe well with it at all. Then I read God of Malice by Rina. This is the first book in a spin-off series of one of her other series. I'm not sure what the other one is called, but these are all like dark romances basically. I think the first series is like hardcore like bully romances, and these ones are kind of bully romances as well. This one follows Killian and Glendon, and basically they meet out on this like cliff one night, or bridge, where Glendon's friend has previously driven a car off and died, killed himself, and she's back visiting the spot, and she bumps into him, and he's like, when I say like super mean to her, I mean like super mean to her. This book had a lot of things in it that I have absolutely hated in other books. In fact, there's a scene in this book that is very similar to a scene in Untouchable by Sam Mariano, and that scene in that book caused me to give it 1 star. I did give this book 4 stars, but I think for me the difference was, I think this author did a very good job of telling you what you were getting into in the note at the beginning. Like, she didn't try to pretend that it was going to be like a normal book. She was like, he's not a morally gray character, he is a morally black character. And I feel like because I knew what I was getting into, I was more open to what happened in the book, whereas like I could see someone who didn't read that warning hating this book because they didn't know what they were getting into. But I think when your mindset is like in the right place, then, you know, it's a good book. I will say what I didn't like about this was at the beginning we see a lot of Glendon and her friend group, and I know that that's because they're all the kids from the characters in the previous series that I haven't read, but I felt like there was just so many names being dropped, and like, oh, this person's cousin, and this one's their brother, and like whatever. I was getting so confused as to who was who and who was related to who and all of that, and I never really like fully grasped that. I kind of just halfway through was like, you know what, who cares? Like, I'm never gonna get these characters straight. And like I said, that's partly my fault for not reading the first series, but also it doesn't say anywhere that you should read the first series before reading that one, so maybe not entirely my fault. But I didn't love that aspect. I know it's also because they're probably all going to get their own books eventually too, but just felt like a little overwhelmed. I felt like we had 50 characters introduced all at once at the beginning of the book, and I didn't love that, obviously. But it was a decent, like, bully, dark romance if you're looking for something like that. And lastly, I read All Roads Lead Here by Mariana Zapata. This is one of her more recent ones, I think. I think this was like her second last release, and I just haven't gotten around to it. I have never actually physically read a Mariana Zapata book. I didn't physically read this one either. I got the audiobook, and that was why I finally read it. I did like this one. I gave it 4 stars. It didn't top The Wall of Winnipeg in me. For me, I personally just love that book, and I feel like the grumpiness that Aiden has in that book is just unmatched by even Mariana Zapata's other characters. Like, I love him so much. And this was good. Like I said, I did like it. It just wasn't like The Wall of Winnipeg tier. And this one follows Rhodes and Aurora, and Aurora has moved to this tiny mountain town to sort of get away from her life and go back to where she once grew up. When she gets there, she's already like pre-rented an apartment above a garage on someone's property, and she shows up and she is like moving in when this guy shows up, and he's like, what are you doing here? And they find out this guy's son actually rented her the apartment without telling his dad. And so his dad is like, no, like, get out, like, we're not renting this, like, you need to leave. And she's like, but I already paid, like, up front and whatever. And his son is like, I wanted a new guitar, so, like, I listed this and you weren't gonna do it. And he's like, no, I don't want her here, but she offers to pay, like, triple the rent. He's like, fine, you can stay as long as I never see you. And she's like, okay, like, no problem, like, you don't even know I'm here. And of course, like, things go from there. It was good. Like I said, definitely like Grumpy Sunshine. Really loved that. It does have that sort of like small mountain town feeling to it. They go hiking a lot in this. It's very outdoorsy. And so I did really like that aspect to it. And I'm glad to finally have gotten another Mariana Zapata one done, because I feel like I said, I never can read these physically, so I always have to wait till I can get the audiobooks. And did really enjoy this one. So that is everything that I read in February. I know my March wrap up is going to be bigger already because I'm filming this currently on March 2nd and I've already read 2 books. So my March wrap-up hopefully will be a lot longer and have a lot more books in it. But that is everything that I read in February. So thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button down below. I do new videos every single week, and I will see you next time.